The city of Troy has fallen. In the wake of war, the Greeks wonder about their return home. Homer says by no means were all of them prudent or just, and the ones who weren't will never make it back. An assembly is called, harsh words are spoken, strife breaks out, and Nestor says the well-grieved Achaeans sprang up with a huge din, each side pondering hard thoughts against the other, for Zeus was bringing upon us an evil doom. So in the morning half the ships slipped away, including Odysseus, and they began to sail home. But when strife breaks out yet again, Odysseus changes his mind. He turns his ship around and sails back to Troy, away from the Greeks who would make it home, towards the doomed men of Agamemnon destined for a blood banquet massacre. Our hero has swerved towards hardship. Here in Book 3, Telemachus, Odysseus' son, is learning these things from King Nestor. Right? King Nestor is a veteran of the Trojan War. And so Telemachus has arrived in Pylos to discover news about his father. Right? And the last time Nestor saw Odysseus was when Odysseus had taken his Ithacans, turned around, and sailed back to Troy. Now, let's look at the way that Nestor tells the tale, starting at line 147 of the Fagles translation. Zeus contrived in his heart a fatal homeward run for all the Achaeans who were fools, at least dishonest too, so many met a disastrous end. So here we can see that there is a reason some men will make it home and others won't. The fools will have a fatal run. So on the shores of Troy, the Greeks have a shouting match. Some are on the side of Menelaus, who wants to leave as soon as possible, and some are on the side of his brother, Agamemnon. Nestor says, a crisis. Menelaus urging the men to fix their minds on the voyage home across the sea's broad back. But it brought no joy to Agamemnon, not at all. He meant to detain us there and offer victims, anything to appease Athena's dreadful wrath. Poor fool, he never dreamed Athena would not comply. The minds of the everlasting gods don't change so quickly. So, something that the Greeks did has angered the goddess Athena. We don't know what it is exactly. The assumption could be that they did something to dishonor her temples in the city. But I think the interesting line is at 160, when Nestor says he, as in Agamemnon, meant to detain us there and offer victims. Detain is the word. So he didn't want one half of the Greeks to flee. Why? What does he care? Right? So we already know that the wicked fools will not make it home. And here we can see that the doomed partisans of the Greeks are seeking to detain them, right? The ones who will make it back. So the concept here, I think, is that the wicked are trying to involve the just in their own wrongdoing. They want to make sure that they all contribute to a joint penance to the goddess, and by that means they hope they might be saved. Now we see something like this in real Greek history. In 404 BC, after the fall of Athens, the city was ruled by a homicidal oligarchy known as the 30, who were putting many people to death in the city. And they naturally feared, the 30 did, that if there were ever a successful uprising against them, that they should expect no mercy. So they decided to create a refuge for themselves in the nearby town of Eleusis. And in doing so, they apprehended the adult males of the town. And rather than just put them to death immediately, one of the leaders of the 30 forced the soldiers to vote for the condemnation so that they would be impugned by the deed as well. This is what Critias, the leader of the 30, says. The Eleusinians captured here must be condemned, so that both you and we may take confidence in and draw fear from the same deeds. He then pointed out a spot and ordered them to go there and render their vote for all to see. And so looking at these lines, that's from Xenophon, we can imagine back to the Homer, that the shouting match amongst the Greeks on the Trojan shore was something similar. You benefited from the plunder of the city as well. You should show penance to the goddess alongside us and take similar responsibility. Now, to the next point, there's yet another lesson from the way that Nestor tells this story to Telemachus. Now, Nestor is a wise man. Athena had told us to credit everything Nestor says at the beginning of Book 3. At line 22, Athena had said, "He'll never lie. The man is far too wise." And Nestor is further shown in a good light much later when they are cooking the heifer that they sacrificed, and they remove the thigh bones to cook them. And at line 515, the old king burned these over dried split wood. This is a great detail. The king is not so set above everyone else that he doesn't have to cook. Right? And this is no random addition to the poem. It comes up again in Book 18 when Odysseus is disguised as a beggar in his own halls at Ithaca, and he is taunted by the suitor Eurymachus as being a lazy beggar. Odysseus responds, "If only the two of us could go man to man in the labors of the field, I swinging a well-curved scythe and you swinging yours, we'd test our strength for work. You'd see what a straight, unbroken furrow I could cut you then." Right? So this speaks to the ancient Greeks having a different view of kingship. Right? The fat cartoon kings of Disney, with servants for everything, did not command the Greek polis. Odysseus, and I think Nestor too, would assert that they assign no task to anyone that they could not do as well, if not better, than the subject to whom it is assigned. But lastly, regarding the decision of Odysseus to turn his ships around, this is a momentous choice because we know that he will lose his crew and be 10 years in coming home. But this is how Nestor puts it at line 180. "Some swung their rolling warships hard about. Odysseus sailed them back, the flexible, wily king, veering over to Agamemnon now to shore his fortunes up." Nestor does not pass judgment on this move by Odysseus. Instead, he compliments him as flexible and wily. He had already told us that the Greeks who made it home were the good ones, that the bad ones were doomed, and here is Odysseus choosing the wrong side. And yet in this moment, he says nothing against Odysseus. I think we are supposed to learn how to avoid speaking evil about our fellow men. If Nestor were a commonplace scandalmonger, he would have rejoiced at the chance to undercut Odysseus. That we are urged to refrain from this is not just a theme in Homer, but elsewhere in literature. The Greek poet Pindar writes in his first Olympian ode, "Impoverishment is often the lot of slanderers." And the greatest of all writers, Francois Rabelais, makes his character Epistemon in his third book of Gargantua and Pantagruel interpret all things to the best. Now, to me, the most cogent discussion of this concept comes from John Calvin, who is not my favorite usually, but I do like this interpretation of the 9th commandment, the commandment in the Bible which says you should not bear false witness, which is to say, don't lie. Calvin interprets it this way: "Let us not imagine it is a sufficient excuse to say that on many occasions our statements are not false. He who forbids us to defame our neighbor's reputation by falsehood desires us to keep it untarnished insofar as truth will permit. Though the commandment is only directed against falsehood, it intimates that the preservation of our neighbor's good name is recommended." So back to the Odyssey. If Nestor had said Odysseus brought it on himself, all these woes, Nestor would not be speaking falsely, but it would be a malignant truth, designed not at all towards the preservation of human honor.